evening, everyone. I'm Ellen Myers, the Programs and Communications Director for the Newton Free Library. Thanks so much for tuning in for this program with Tammy Gooler Loeb. We are delighted to be launching her new book, Work from the Inside Out: Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career that Fulfills You. We extend our gratitude to the Ashland, Drake, Lowell, and Tewksbury Public Libraries who are co-sponsoring this program, and also to Robert Hayes from Tewksbury for setting up and running the Zoom session. I hope you'll take advantage of all that the Newton Free Library has to offer by coming by our building or making use of the many digital resources available on our website at newtonfreelibrary.net. Remember, we have a wealth of virtual programs for people of all ages. Please note that the closed captioning has been enabled for this session. You can turn it off or back on by clicking on the live CC transcript icon at the bottom of your screen. Also, please note that this program is being recorded. We'll take questions via the Q&A feature at the end of the program, and Tammy will be engaging the participants several times throughout the session. Watch the chat. I'll be putting in a link if you want to sign up for the Newton Free Library's email newsletters. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Tammy Gooler Loeb. She is the author of Work from the Inside Out: Breakthrough 9 Common Obstacles in Design a Career that Fulfills You. She is a career and executive coach, speaker, and facilitator who focuses on career satisfaction and leadership development. Tammy's clients represent many sectors and industries. Tammy's weekly podcast, Work from the Inside Out, showcases career transition stories of people who have found more meaningful work. Her expertise has appeared in Harvard Business Review, Ascend, Forbes, Fast Company, and the Boston Globe. Tammy holds a BA in psychology from Hampshire College, Amherst, Mass, and an MBA from Boston University in Boston, Massachusetts. And now I'll turn the screen over to you, Tammy.
Thank you, Ellen. And I want to thank the Newton Library and the Tewksbury Library, Robert and Ellen, for hosting this tonight, and the folks in Drake, Lowell, and Ashland libraries for also promoting this event. So really, really delighted to be here tonight. I'm going to share my screen now, and we will get things going. All right. I'm going to assume everyone can see my screen, unless I hear otherwise.
It looks good to me, Tammy.
All right, good. Thanks for letting me know. All right. So I would like to start tonight with just telling you a little bit about why I'm here, why I wrote this book, why I care about work from the inside out, from survival to fulfillment. You know, as a coach, even as a person, actually, I am wildly curious about people, about the choices they make in their lives, specifically with regard to work and careers. I've always loved to hear about what people are doing with their days, and always want to know, what do they find satisfying? What do they find meaningful? What do they find fulfilling? And I'll tell you why. One reason why is because, you know, we spend the better part of our lives at work, more time than we do with our families, more time than we do sleeping, more time than we do a lot of important things in our lives. And so it seems to me that if we're spending that much of our waking hours in our adult lives at work, it seems to me that that's pretty important, don't you think? So I figure this is my why. If we're spending all this time at work, why do we have so many people who are feeling disengaged at work? We have many studies that are showing this. We're in the midst of what's called the Great Resignation. People are dropping jobs left and right. And the statistics are showing over and over again that people are feeling disengaged. I want to change that. And I think that this book can help people find their way towards more fulfilling work. And I'm not here just to sell a book. I'm here to inspire people to think about what do you want? What's going to be more satisfying and fulfilling for you? So our objectives tonight. I want to help identify some of the common fears that keep people from pursuing more satisfying occupations. Want to talk about how to transform your doubts, your limiting beliefs, so that you will be ready for positive reinvention and ongoing career satisfaction. And to understand why fear is the foundation of immobilization and how to feel more empowered so that you can take action and step into some of the things that would be more satisfying. And then we'll also look at some strategies for building self-confidence, managing your expectations, and approach things like networking and much more than that. But before we get into some of those things, I'd like to actually ask you a couple of questions. So I'd like to do a poll. Can we go to that, Robert?
Here it comes out, Tammy.
Okay. All right. So thinking about your first paid job, please answer the poll. How old were you when you had your first paid job?
All right, it looks like I'm gonna. We have a 92% participation rate, so that's good enough for me. I'm gonna end the poll here.
Sounds good. Let's see what we got here, Robert. All right, so it looks like we've got a good spread here, but it looks like quite a few of you. Let's see if I can do the math quickly here. So 14% of you, 7 of you started your first paid job by the age of 10. And then the majority of you got your first paid job before age 17. And then about 20% of you started your first paid job at age 18 and older. So that sounds about right. All right, let's go to the next poll question now. All right, what was your first paid job? I just picked a few ideas, thinking that these were some typical jobs that people might have had in their early career.
All right, I'm gonna end the poll.
All right. Wow, look at this. Okay, so it looks like we have a pretty clear split. No camp counselors. All right. So, well, now I am dying of curiosity here. We have quite a few people in the group who said other. I would like to know what your first paid job was. Those of you who answered other, because I think that sometimes when I ask people this question, they think about maybe the first job they had as a teenager or a little older. They don't always think about those very early jobs. You know, for example, one of my earliest jobs was my mother used to pay me 25 cents a shirt to help iron my father's shirts. boy, do I know how to iron a shirt. And guess what? I can't even find the iron in my house anymore. So that was one of my first early jobs. And sometimes we don't think about those things, but I would love to hear from a few people if that's possible, either through the chat. I guess through the chat is the best way, or if anyone wants to raise a hand and explain what some of your early jobs were.
Tammy, we already have some great answers in the chat.
Yes.
Was a talking mailbox at Christmas
Yes.
time.
I knew that.
Lauren was a library page. Go libraries.
Wow.
Anita
Danila was a
right.
legal assistant, first job. Wow. Snow shoveling. Okay. A travel soccer referee. Worked at a nursing home, then a bank.
Deliver ads for a grocery store at age 9.
Look at that. So these are some really, really interesting first jobs.
Snow shoveling, working at a recycling center, throwing glass in the bins.
Wow. Dangerous. Look at that. Wow. That is fabulous. That is so interesting. Dental assistant. Full-time job at 16. Wow. Okay. Well, so some of you really went to what I would consider to be you kind of skipped over the lower level labor type jobs and went right into a professional level position. It sounds like that's really interesting. Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. We got one more question we're going to do right now. We're going to do another poll later on, but let's do one more right now. Oh, that's okay, Marie. It's okay. You babysat earlier and then the other jobs. That's okay. Yeah. All right. Now, do the math. Think about your first answer, the earliest age at which you had your first paid job, and then how old you are now. You don't have to tell us. How many years now have you been working, if you're still working now? Even if let's say you're not working right now, but think about over the years that you've been working. Total, how many years have you been a working person? Even if it's been part-time, doesn't matter. Just think about the number of years that you've been getting work experience.
I'm going to give the poll another 5 seconds.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
Let's see. So we have a couple of people less than 10 years and a significant number over 41 years, 31 to 40 years. Okay. So we've got 63, am I getting this right? 63% between 31 and over 41 years. So think about this. I was just reflecting on this. My father retired after, I think, 31 or 32 years in his profession. And that's not unusual for someone in his generation. And here we're looking at quite a few people who are saying they have been working over or close to 40 years. So you can see that things have changed. Many of us are living longer. We are enjoying our health longer. Many of us are working longer for all kinds of reasons. But this ties in with my point of what I was talking about earlier, about the fact that we spend, many of us do, not everyone, but many of us spend more time at work than we do doing a lot of other things in our lives. And on top of that, we're spending many more years working. And I don't say that in a begrudging way. At least I don't, because I love what I do. But my point to you is I want to help more people find their way to loving what they do, or at least liking it a lot. So thank you, Robert. This is very helpful. So we can see we've got a lot of seasoned working people in this group. And that's really my point, is that we spend a lot of time at work, and yet I know that in the culture that we're in, many of us have lived at varying times or know people who go to work every day and find themselves just kind of dialing it in, or kind of tolerating either a boss they don't enjoy working for, or a job that they're okay with it, but they don't love it. And they can do that for years. I've heard people say, well, I only have 5 years left to retire, so I'll just kind of do it and put up with it. And look, I understand why people do those things. I'm not begrudging that. But I also know that's 5 years. That's 5 years of your life. You're just kind of dialing it in. Is that really what you want? For some people, the answer would be absolutely yes. And for other people, they'd say, maybe I should rethink things a little bit. So I want to talk now about what inside out means. So when I say work from the inside out, what I mean is that when people work from the inside out, they're usually making a decision to make a choice about their work from a more intuitive, instinctive gut feeling. Now, most of us have had the experience of making a decision from that gut feeling place. A lot of times we've also made decisions not from that place and wished we had, maybe have regrets about it. I've seen a lot of people make decisions about their work. I've had clients who have done this, where they make decisions based on external factors. Either somebody encouraged them to go after a job because of the salary, or because the commute is convenient, or they feel other people have expectations of them, but it's not necessarily what their inner voice is telling them they really want. And they ignore that and they go after the job. And I've found that some of those folks, especially if they've been working with me, end up knocking on my door about 6 months later saying it wasn't the right decision. So the inside out approach is really about making decisions about your work based more on checking in with that inner voice, that intuition. Chances are that's going to serve you a whole lot better. Some of you might be familiar with the work of Malcolm Gladwell. He wrote a book called Blink. And in that book, he talks about how the research shows that gut feelings, quick decisions often end up being better decisions than long, drawn out, thought out decisions for a lot of people, overly analyzed decisions. Now, I'm going to probably say something else about that a little later that actually butts up against that a little bit, but I want to say that book actually makes a good case for this inside out kind of thinking. So I want to say two things. You can see I've jumped to chapter 2 of the book. So now I'm going to walk you through some of the chapters of the book, because I want to walk through the different kinds of fears and things that people encounter, or I have found in my 20 plus years of coaching that people encounter. Chapter 1, I'll start there, even though I don't have a slide directly for it. Chapter 1 is called Fear. Is it your friend or your foe? And I would say it's both. So all the chapters throughout the book talk about fear, and they talk about the kinds of things that we are often afraid of. And those are the things that stop us from making changes in our lives that would benefit us. So that's chapter 1. So it kind of lays the groundwork for the rest of the book. So I wanted to just put that out there. In chapter 2, we look at it's never too late. Chapter 2 looks at mostly about age, and I profile 3 people who changed careers pretty significantly after the age of 40. And I'll tell you, I actually changed careers around the age of 40. I became a coach around the age of 40. And as you can tell, I've been doing it for a little over 20 years. So you can do the math and you can see I'm still working and I still plan on working. So I'm delighted with some of the choices I've made. Now, I would say that some of the other things I've done in my career are somewhat parallel to what I'm doing now. But I would say that I really made a significant commitment to invest in some training and some things that I did around 40 to become a coach. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made. One of the other stories I tell in the book is about a cousin of mine, actually, who was a teacher and then became a guidance counselor. And around the age of 48, she decided, I think I want to go to law school. So she started going to law school at night, and she became a lawyer by the time she was 50. And she continued to work as a guidance counselor. And then at night, after she got out of school at 3 o'clock, her husband was also a lawyer. She'd go to her husband's law office and she'd practice law for a few hours, a few nights a week. She loved it. She loved learning new things, and she enjoyed having that as part of her life. Another person I worked with was a man who was 58 who changed careers completely. He had been a software engineer, and he ended up working in the field of affordable housing at the age of 58. Delightfully happy with the changes he made. So these are the kinds of things that I have seen people do at that stage of their career. But a lot of people are often, they talk themselves out of it. They're afraid it's too late. They're afraid to spend money on an education, or they're afraid, they'll something will go wrong, or, they think, oh, I'll have to take a pay cut if I start over. I don't want to start over. Well, some of those things are true. So those are choices that people have to make. But those are the kinds of things that you can, you have to make choices about. And what I often will say to people is, well, think about it. If you're, whatever age you are, if you think it's too late, think about you're close to the end of your life. Maybe you're on your deathbed. Will you regret not having tried something else? If that's the conversation you're having and there's regret there, you might want to think twice about making some other choices. It doesn't mean that you have to go back to school and get, another degree or a doctorate or something, but there may be some other way to fill that need. Don't turn it into an all or nothing kind of conversation with yourself. And I think that's another underlying theme throughout the book, and with this whole theme of fear, is that when people get into that state of kind of fearful kind of paralysis where they don't allow themselves to move forward, it's usually because they've sort of trapped themselves in this all or nothing kind of thinking. It's either one way or the other, and there's no in between, and there's no other options. And that's where people end up getting stuck. And for some reason, they can't get out of it. All right, let's keep going. All right. Here's another typical place I see people who get stuck. They have too many responsibilities. They're taking care of a family. They're taking care of aging parents. They have people counting on them, or they tell themselves they have people counting on them. And these things are true. There's no doubt about it. In the book, I profile 2 people. One is a parent in a 2-parent family, and one is a single parent. And they both changed careers fairly dramatically while raising school-age children. Now, I will say this is going to butt up against a little bit against what I was saying earlier about making more quick decisions from your intuition. They actually did make decisions from their intuition, but they went about a planning process, each of them, that went on over a period of years. And so there was a bit of analysis and planning that went into their process, but they stuck with it and they made it happen. But it did take several years. And I think that's that's the piece that I think is really important about this, is that yes, it's not something you do overnight where you just say, oh, it doesn't matter. They'll have to take care of themselves and I'll just go ahead and find my way. No. So the two examples in the book are good ones, because these were people who really had to make things work out in order to make some of those changes. And they did. And I think the other thing that was interesting about it was that they also set an interesting example for their children in the process of stepping into some things that were very fulfilling for them. So that's the other part of that equation. And in chapter 4, we talk about how careers are not formed in a straight line. A lot of us were raised, with questions like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or we're juniors or seniors in high school. What do you want to study in college? What do you want to major in? What do you want to do with that? And there's always this thought that somehow you're going to decide in college or somewhere along the way what you want to do, and that's the trajectory you're going to be on. And I think that's true in my generation, especially as a baby boomer. The fact is that most of us, if not all of us, have at least 2 careers in our lifetimes, if not more than that, and especially today. And I'm sure that you know plenty of people who have done more than one thing. And I'm not talking about going way back to babysitting and things like that. I mean, that I guess would count as more than one career, right? But I'm talking about, let's say, post high school or post college, and having done something that's on a more professional level. So, yet at the same time, I've seen a lot of people who will start on a career path. Maybe they get elevated a couple of times, and then for one reason or another, something either doesn't work out, or they decide that they really aren't happy anymore in it. And I find that they kind of turn on themselves. They feel like a failure, or they feel like something's wrong with them because they're not staying on the path. And I think that's because we've created this set of assumptions and expectations about what a career should look like. And that's why I wrote this chapter, because I think we still, even though we know that careers are not necessarily formed on a straight path, we still somehow have these underlying assumptions about that. So I want to say, give yourself permission to go in lots of different directions. Here's another good one. You might wonder what this picture's all about. Don't default to what you're good at. Make sure you at least like it or love it. So we have this picture of this woman who's looks like she's cleaning a toilet quite happily. And I often use the example of toilet cleaning to make my point here. So I always tell people, don't just do what you're good at, do something you like or love. Because oftentimes when you just default to something you're good at, it's not always something you like to do. So the example I always give is toilet cleaning, because I'm really good at it. I can clean a toilet very, very well, but I don't enjoy it as much as she does. So I would say, let her do it. She's happy and I'm glad for her. But I certainly don't want to be the one doing that for a living. I will be glad to do lots of other things for a living. And I'm glad that there are people who enjoy cleaning, because that's what makes the world go round. So again, what has happened over the years is many of us have had well-intentioned people in our lives who have said things to us growing up, maybe, oh, you write so well, or you're so good in math, or you're good at this, you're good at that, you should become a thus and such. And for some of us, we might have taken that to heart and actually followed through and become an accountant, an engineer, a doctor, whatever. a lawyer. And we find ourselves at a certain juncture in our lives where we maybe even wake up one day and say, oh my goodness, I really don't like this. I'm good at it, but I don't like it. And now I'm so far into it. How could I possibly get out of it? I've seen a lot of that in my practice. So again, this is something that I try to suggest that people really try to be aware of. And when they say, well, you know, I could do this, I could do that, that's great. But check in with yourself, take that litmus test and ask yourself, is this something I think I would enjoy? Not just, can I do it? So here we are, success. It's a very, very loaded word. And it's not a destination, in my opinion. And I'm curious what your definition of success is. You know, we hear a lot of times people will say, oh, you know, they've arrived at success. Or I'll hear someone say, you know, they're very successful. And then they'll go on to describe what that means. So I'm curious what your definition of success is. So we're going to do another poll, Robert. Let's see what other people's view of success is.
Just going to give it 10 more seconds. Okay.
Okay, let's see what we have here. So when the question's asked, what one word comes to mind first? We have quite a spread of answers here. So the majority, let's see, we got a lot of answers for living life true to your own values, which could mean a lot of different things. A blended, balanced professional and family life, wealth, money, assets, having material possessions, you know, connotates success for people, what that means. One person said educational achievements and credentials. And as you can see, we have some other answers here. I'm curious to hear from some of the people who used other as their answer. And I'd also be curious to hear from some of the folks who said living life true to their own values. I'm curious what some of those, what that looks like for you. If we could hear from some of you in the chat. Let's see, Ben said, having the freedom and opportunities to make more and different choices for career, family, and living. Okay. So really setting your life up that way. And Emma said, if I live life to my own values, I am hopefully then feeling success in the different aspects of my life. Okay. And Budster Wallace said, to truly be of service to others. And Anna said, from Queer Eye, success is measured by how you make those around you feel. Oh, I like that. Well, I like all of these, actually. I shouldn't. Larry said, make the world a better place through political activity and social chance. Suzanne said, a hybrid of professional writer living comfortable work. And Bella said, I would suggest that living life according to one's values holds true within the professional and family balance one chose. Marie said, people may consider living life according to their own values, goals, and worldview as their definition of success, rather than money and wealth and possessions. This was a hard question to answer. Yeah, it is a hard question to answer. Absolutely. And it looked like there were a number of things in here that were important to you, Marie. And Linda said, allowing for every member of the family to be self-actualized. Yeah. Those are some really wonderful answers. Yeah. So it sounds like we've got a number of people here who've really given this some thought. Great. Not that the other people didn't give it thought, but I think this is, it's interesting how we all have different views of what success is. And there's not one right or wrong answer to that. And that's really my point is, and I think by the kinds of answers that you gave, I think that you would agree with me that it's not a destination, it's a process, right? There's so many different ways to find yourself to success and to really develop that throughout your life, right? Cindy says, to live to my own values, I left a very solid corporate position when the organization shifted and no longer aligned with the way I approached life, family, and how I elected to support others. Yeah. So part of that success for you, Cindy, was to make a change and to stay aligned with your values. And I hear that from people on a regular basis. I think, sometimes success can look like making a difficult decision, right? So there's a lot of different ways to look at this. I feel like I'm in good company tonight. This is nice, very nice, wonderful. So, and as you will see, if you end up reading the book, or some of you I know have, you'll see that some of the stories that come out of this chapter are similar to a little bit like what Cindy just shared, that they either left positions that they were in, or they made some different decisions to pivot or change their work based either on values or preferences that they had. But those decisions aren't always easy to make, even though you're making the right decision. Making the right decision isn't always easy. Sometimes it even is fearful, right? And so when we talk about fear, friend or foe, sometimes fear is your foe because it stops you from making the right decision and you end up staying with, let's say, the devil you know. Sometimes it's your friend because you end up stepping into that area that maybe makes you a little uncomfortable, but you're making the right decision for yourself. But it's your friend because it also lends itself to that fearful place that feels a little exciting too, even though you're not really sure what's going to happen. And yet you want to find out what's going to happen because you can't stay where you are. So this is good. Thank you for participating, everyone. That's great. So this is an area, chapter 7, I feel very strongly about. Those of you who know me know that I'm big on this. You do need to network, and not just for a job. Now, when I say network, I'm talking about staying connected, but I'm talking about something else as well. I'm talking about getting information. So I work with a lot of people who are either trying to decide what they want to do next, or who are trying to grow and develop themselves as leaders, as managers, or as executives in either relating to the people who they supervise or people who are above them. And yet one of the things that they often struggle with is being in a healthy connection with the people around them. And so when I talk about networking, I'm really talking about developing healthy connections with people. And part of that process involves getting information. Oftentimes when people are feeling a little awkward about networking, I know, there are all these things about introverts and networking. And I agree that if you're an introvert, there are certain kinds of networking that are going to work better for you. But there's also another frame or a reframe I want to offer you around networking. And that is that it's about getting information. Oftentimes, when you feel awkward about networking, it's because you don't have the information you need, and you need to get that information. If you have more information, then you know what it is that you're trying to talk about, or you know what it is you're trying to ask about. And that at least puts you a step ahead. So oftentimes when I work with people around this, we spend a good amount of time talking about what kinds of questions do you want to ask? What is it that you want to learn about, let's say, another individual who you're going to approach and speak with? And because a lot of times people will start with, oh, I don't know how I'm going to present myself to them. And I say, no, you're not presenting yourself to them. What you're going to do is you're going to take an interest in them first. Yes, they will ask you about them. They will ask you about you, but put that on hold for a moment and take an interest in them. As Dale Carnegie said, be interested, not interesting. And it makes a big difference. And I notice when I suggest that to people, I see their shoulders going down and they get a lot more comfortable with the process. And the more that they learn about other people, the more it actually sparks new ideas in them. They get more excited about the process. And it also enhances the way they connect with other people. And it makes other people more interested in them, because the other people see that they're really good listeners and that they're taking an interest in them. And people appreciate that. So this chapter is really rich and full of great ideas about different ways to connect with people and different ways to develop those connections and also to get that information. So I really encourage people to look at this chapter. And one thing I'll say about the book is you don't have to read every chapter of the book. You could easily pick up the book and read just a few chapters and get some value out of it. So chapter 8 looks at, but I'm not qualified. Do I belong? So I profiled 2 women who started their careers out without degrees and without a lot of work experience or qualifications. And they both managed to work their way up to fairly high level positions in the corporate world without any credentials whatsoever. Now, you'd say that's pretty unusual, and I'd say it is, but I think that there were some characteristics that they each displayed that I think are essential to moving forward in your career regardless. So I wanted to tell their stories because I think their stories really exaggerate or really, showcase some qualities that I think are important in terms of being open and curious. And they showed a lot of that. They showed a real desire to learn and roll up their sleeves and just try new things. And that made a big difference for them. They also had some people who were willing to give them a chance. And that was very helpful as well. The image that I have here is kind of a bit of a mind map, but org chart it could be. The reason why I put this here is because I think that a lot of times when people get discouraged, when they think they're not qualified for a job that maybe they're interested in, and they get discouraged and they don't apply, and they get afraid. They get afraid. Oh, I couldn't apply for that. I don't have the qualifications, or I don't have that software package or those skills. And what they don't realize is that the people posting the job, they don't necessarily know what they're looking for in a candidate yet. Sometimes they put together a very generic job description. So as you can see, these are very plain looking, figures on this org chart, and they're going to move those pieces around until they figure out what they really need and what works. And how many of you have seen where you've applied for a job and you didn't get called, and then next thing you knew, that job was reposted again, and you're wondering, why didn't I ever get called? I have the qualifications, or at least I'm somewhat qualified. So I think that if you think that it's something you're interested in, you have some of the qualifications, I do think it's worth applying, because a lot of times job descriptions are written in a somewhat cursory manner. And sometimes if they see your resume, they might call you, they might be interested. And of course, there are other things you should be doing to get your foot in the door, not just sending in a resume. So do not let your qualifications be the only factor in terms of getting your foot in the door for a particular job. That's part of the picture, but it's not the whole picture. And then our last chapter is around uncertainty, and I profile 3 people whose lives literally changed in a moment. And it affected the way they looked at their careers. Not immediately, but it did affect their careers. And I actually have the benefit of one of those people profiled who's here with us tonight. And I'd like to invite her to join us for a brief conversation so she can share a little bit about her story and what she went through, and also some of the typical things she went through as somebody who had a long-term career and became, I guess, a little disillusioned. And yet it was hard to make a change. And then things changed very dramatically in her life. And then she kind of had a wake-up call, I'd say. So I want to introduce you to my friend and colleague, Jenny Lisk. Hey, Jenny.
Hey, Tammy, can you see me?
I can. Welcome.
Thank you.
So uncertainty is a fact of life. So Jenny, welcome, and tell us, briefly, because we don't have a lot of time here, but you're on a whole different pathway now, but your career before your life turned upside down, you had a really long, solid career working for IBM. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I spent 20 years in the tech industry, in IT and project management and things like that, and which in some ways was really terrific. But eventually I started to feel like there must be more for me, right? Like there were so many good things about it, and I didn't feel like it was, you talked before about looking back and regretting if you didn't try something or didn't, right? But I couldn't figure out what it was. And so, if anybody's looking at your chart here, you can tell the end of the story is my husband died. And it was about 6 years ago right now, about 7 years ago, he got sick. And that really started me on pivoting my career, and, not right away. Because I couldn't figure out what to pivot it to. But a lot of times things come up based on, your own experience leads you to see a gap, right? That then you start saying, maybe I could fill that gap. And in my case, it was thinking about widowed parenting and how hard and unfamiliar, right, that job is. And so starting to put some pieces together and say, maybe I could shift my career and do something with this. Exploring that, and ultimately, as you've got on the your screen here, podcast, book, et cetera. But what
you make it sound like it's a lot of hard work.
But. But thinking about one of the things that really motivated me to finally make a change is to say, I've been unhappy for a while. My husband got like half of a life, right? Now he's 44, so is that half? I don't know. Let's say maybe it's half. And if I kind of like half-heartedly live the rest of my life, I felt like that would kind of be doubly tragic. And I felt like it was kind of a two-edged sword. I had to choose, but I also got to choose what was next for me. And this quote you put on the screen here, I mean, what I really came down to was I said, to myself, if my life was the same 5 years from now as it is today, and this was, a few years back, I was asking
Yeah.
myself this,
Right.
would I be okay with that? Because it's easy
Yeah.
to go along from day to day,
Yeah.
not making any changes or even just steps towards a
Yeah.
change, right?
Right.
And if the answer is no, or especially if the answer is hell no, then now is the time to start doing something and taking a step or two and feeling your way towards. And I think that's where, your book and the different examples that you have of people's stories and the choices they've made and the challenges they faced and what they've decided to do about them can help people hopefully get, envision maybe themselves in some of the examples or portions of some of the examples and get some inspiration to think about what next steps they might take.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've over the last couple of years now, you've really built quite a following and a community around you, and with other widowed parents and grief communities, and you're helping a lot of people, and you're really filling a need that wasn't being filled. And I just want to also share with people that, even years prior, before your husband got sick, you did go and try to take courses. You thought about nursing school. You thought about other things. It wasn't for lack of trying. And even after your husband passed away, you went back to work at IBM. I mean, it's not like, there were some fits and starts and things that I think this is what happens to a lot of us in our careers. It's not like there's just, one flow that one day you decide you want to do something different, and then, you either do or you don't. Like, it's not an all or nothing thinking kind of thing. You struggled with this for a long time. But I think then even after you lost Dennis, you still went back to IBM, and then it took some time before you arrived at this point, wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah. And to your point from earlier about, do you necessarily have to go back to school if that's prohibitive for various reasons, cost, time, responsibilities? My first thought was, well, if I'm going to change, I'd better go back to school. And then I started hitting the blockers. Well, it costs too much. Well, I have 2 kids. Well. And then I started realizing, I could still make these changes and pivot in this new direction. And it doesn't have to mean going back to school. So how else could I do that? And it came down to saying, I'm seeing a gap in the world, and I think I could fill that. So what could I do to start filling that gap and kind of feeling my way along? And so I'd encourage people to, maybe think in their own lives what gaps they're seeing that they think they could maybe help solve. And I mean, nominate yourself to do it. Why not? Right? Nobody's going to nominate you. You just do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, just do it.
not to use an advertising slogan in your webinar here, but
Right. Well, thank you, Jenny, and thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for generously sharing your story on my podcast and allowing me to share it in the book. You're doing a lot of really good work with people, and really filling a very important need. And unfortunately, the need is increasing now that we're losing so many people to COVID. So. But I'm glad that you're there and willing to help people with that. So thanks for popping in here tonight.
Yeah, thank you. And congratulations again on your launch of your book.
Thanks so much. All right. So I think, oh goodness, what's happening here? We are ready for some Q&A.
Well, thank you very much, Tammy, and also Jenny. I found the program to be very inspiring, and we already have one question from an anonymous attendee who was asking a little bit about suggestions for career moves after the age of 50. And when I dug a little deeper with them on the Q&A, and really, I think they're getting to the point of saying the mindset that one is nearing retirement is tough. So Jenny was in her 40s when she made this career shift. And, how do you coach folks that are in their 50s and beyond and want to make the changes, but feel like maybe it's too close to retirement?
Well, I think that's a choice, quite frankly. As I said earlier today, a lot of people are working longer. And so I guess it depends on what your mindset is around retirement. Do you, and what is your definition? We didn't get into the poll we didn't do a poll on what's your definition of retirement, right? Because, how do you define retirement these days? Everybody has a different idea. I look at what my parents retired at my age, and I have no intention of doing anything close to that. So I think that, if your goal is to retire, let's say in the next few years, then you make a plan to do something that, why not enjoy whatever time you do plan on spending doing something you enjoy doing? There's no particular way to go about it, whether you're in your 40s or 50s. If you, for example, if you want to be employed by somebody, right? I understand that there's a lot of concerns about ageism. And so I understand that if you're close to retirement, you do get worried about things like, who's going to want to hire me? I'm close enough to retirement. Maybe somebody's going to see that I don't have the longevity to stick around. But there are resources out there for people to look at. There are lists of employers who specifically are willing and very open about their willingness to hire people who are more seasoned, so to speak. And, without knowing the specifics, it's hard to give blanket advice just based on age. Depending on what kinds of skills you have, what do you want to use? How do you want to go about it? Do you want to work full-time, part-time? Do you want to do something entrepreneurial? Is there, I think some people get it in their heads, I want to retire by this age, and that's it. Again, I see that as sort of an arbitrary deadline. And yet, and I say, what's that about? Is there a specific plan or a reason for that? Because, I think it's really a matter of tuning into yourself and deciding, when is it time for you to maybe want to slow down or change the pace of your life a little bit? Is it based on age, or is it based on how you're feeling?
And also, I think, of course, finances come into the picture too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'll just share that I have a former colleague who took a second full-time job after she retired. I think she was in her 60s, and she didn't retire from her second full-time job until she was in her 80s. So, that certainly wouldn't be my choice, but,
Right.
I think about post full-time retirement work, and there's different options around that.
Yeah. You're pointing to situations where some people, we're talking as if everybody has a choice, right? There are people who don't have a choice, who have to work, for whom, if they're relying solely on Social Security and that's not enough for them, or they have other expenses. This is not easy for some people. My goal here is to encourage people to find something they enjoy so that it breathes new life into them. So if they are in a position where they feel that they have to work, maybe beyond an age they really wanted to, at least they're enjoying it while they're doing it.
That's loud and clear, Tammy. I just want to share something cute that one of our attendees named Lisa shared, I'm not going to screen share it, but it was a little Facebook post that had to do with, are you sure? Are you not sure? Should you change? Should you not change? But the cartoon image was really basically like, until you die, or while you're still alive, it's not too late. You can make the change. And I think that's kind of what you're saying. If you're living and breathing, there's an opportunity, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But everybody has their own ideas about what they want for themselves and what they want that to look like. So, I bring a perspective that's mine, and I own that. And I'm not saying that everybody should live the way I think they should live, but I think the other thing that I didn't really emphasize is the resources section in the back of the book, which I think does offer people who have, different goals and different ways of looking at things. It offers a lot of sort of general resources for people who can then pursue things in their own way. And I really wanted to try to provide that so that it's not just about what I think makes sense, and I am basing a lot of what I say based on, over 20 years of working with a wide variety of people. So,
Well, the questions are starting to pour in. Michelle has asked, how does one reassure their families that changing careers may take a lot of work? And I can say, I know where you're coming from, Michelle, because I did it myself. And I was working full time while I was changing careers, and it really was another full-time job.
Yeah. So I think those are conversations that really have to be had. I would say that those are serious conversations. You really have to make sure that when you are going to make, a significant change, that you need to make sure that you really have the support and the backing from those people in your life who either are depending on you or whose support you're depending on. And to the best of your ability to, they don't necessarily have to agree with everything you're doing, but you do have to feel like they understand why you're doing what you're doing. And they have to some degree, care more about your happiness than about their own opinion about how they would go about it. This is part of the compromise that we all make when we're in family situations where we want someone to be happy. And, that's part of the conversation that needs to be had for sure, and, there's no guarantees anywhere. I've heard people say things like, oh, I just want a full-time job with benefits. I don't care. And it's as if they're saying I just want security. Right. And I say, don't count on that. Don't count on anything. And I'm not saying it to be negative. I'm saying it because we live in a world right now, and it's been going on for a while now, where even a job full-time with benefits could go away tomorrow. We do not live in a world of job security that, let's say, our parents had. Layoffs happen all the time. Mergers and acquisitions happen all the time. There are some industries and some fields where there's a higher chance of having some security. But I would say that, the chances are very good that most people will experience a layoff at least once or twice in their career. And so, and I mean, look what happened during COVID, so it's, nobody really knows. That's why I have a chapter on uncertainty. It's not just about stories like Jenny's where something tragic happens. It could be something, more that happens to more people more regularly, like something like a layoff that happens to a lot of people. And so I think that this is actually something I'm thinking about for my next book, is talking about things like have a plan B and have a plan C, actually, and be ready for the unexpected, because I do think that the whole world of employment is not what it used to be. And we need to be in charge of our careers and be prepared for whatever could come. And not to run around scared because of it, but just to be in charge and be ready.
Well, I mean, I think you make a very strong point about addressing our fears. And Marie, I'm just going to read what Marie put in the Q&A and sort of let you unpack it a little bit. She's asking for suggestions for getting back to a career change after years of not working.
Yeah.
Pursuing her own business, having to do with something part-time that without benefits, creating photo books as a job in her career field. That fear and choosing the security of working for a company often nudges my decision not to pursue my own business.
Yeah.
And of course, the financial part does tie into that. So maybe you could sort of give the general, appraisal of what she's experiencing and what her
Yeah.
fears are.
Yeah. So I've heard a lot of people talk about that before. The question of, should I start my own business? Should I go work for an employer? I would say, if you have another source for benefits, let's say your spouse or partner brings in the healthcare benefits and things, then, I think you have a few more options and choices. It's maybe a slightly easier choice to make. The thing that the way that I look at it is, it's either way, you still have to be in charge of what you're doing, whether you become employed somewhere or you start your own business. There's a couple of ways to think about it. One way would be to go get, let's say, a part-time job somewhere and bring in some steady income and feel that kind of regular paycheck stability that you can get. And then on the side, start the business and start to build that up until you feel that it has some legs, and then make that work that way for you until you feel like you can let go. A lot of people do things that way. That's how I started my business. I had a part-time job until I felt like I could go full-time on my own. That worked really, really well for me. And I did it for several years that way. So that's one scenario. Going full-time on your own, if you know what you're doing, if you know how to run your own business, if you know what that entails, then you understand what the risks are, and you know what you're getting into. If you don't really know what that entails, then it's important to, I think, make sure that you get educated on the ins and outs of what that entails, whether you talk, also talking to your accountant if you have one, understand what your tax situation is going to be. There's a lot of different things to consider around that. But again, without knowing the whole situation, there's a number of things to consider. But I don't assume that being employed is more secure, only because that you're putting your employment in someone else's hands, whereas when you're self-employed, you are totally in the driver's seat. So depending on what your knowledge base is and what your ability is to really take charge of that, you can, you could flourish on your own, depending on how much you know about how to do that. There's a lot of great resources out there to help people who are starting their own businesses too. So it could go either way. I don't have a definitive answer one way or the other. I really like the scenario, I think, of working maybe part-time, establishing some stability, and then starting up the entrepreneurial thing on the side.
I took the liberty of putting a link to Score Boston for people who are interested in starting their own business.
Yep. Yep. And there's also the Center for Women in Enterprise is another resource. There's a number of different resources, and certainly it's something I help people with. There's a lot of other people like myself out there who help with these things.
And of course, there's the list of resources that's in the back of your book.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Tammy, we have run out of questions. I'm just going to drop that Center for Women in Enterprise resource into the chat for people. I mean, we have been so delighted to work with you and the other libraries that were involved in this amazing book launch. I know it was quite an endeavor. You didn't talk at all about your journey of writing the book in terms of the 2 years while working full time and also writing a book, but congratulations.
Thank you. It's
I
a
really
pleasure to be here.
Coming. Yes.
Thank you. And thank you, Robert.
Things to say to folks before we close?
Yes, I want to say, if you're considering a change, and even if you have doubts, talk to some trusted people in your life. Don't go at this alone. Don't just stir in your own head. Go outside your own head and talk to some other people who know you well, and get some feedback, because there's a reason why you're having these thoughts. There's a reason why you're considering these things. Trust yourself and take yourself seriously enough to think through what it is that you really want for yourself, and heed Jenny Lisk's words. I think though that quote, I end my book with her quote because I think it makes a lot of sense. Do you want, if your life looks like this 5 years from now, would you be okay with that? What more do I need to say?
Well, thank you so much, and continued success in your executive and career coaching and writing and podcasting careers, Tammy. It's a
Thank you
pleasure
very
to work with
much.
you as always.
All right. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you all. I'm going to end the call.
One
All
sec,
right.
Robert, one sec. People are asking if the book will be available at our libraries. And the book has been just released in the last couple of weeks. So watch your library catalogs, because I know the Newton Free Library has a copy on order. So yes, as soon as we get the book in and catalog, it will be available through the library.
Yes, and if people are inclined, it is available for 99 cents. I know Ellen's going to be mad at me for saying this, but
Not at all.
until tomorrow, it is available. The digital version, the ebook, is available on Amazon for 99 cents until tomorrow as part of the launch.
Grab it. That's what I say, people. Grab that book. Okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to start the launch and make it accessible and affordable to people. Of course, it's worth more than 99 cents, but I wanted to spread it around.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Tammy.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night. Thanks, Robert.